Let's make a start. Welcome to the Welsh Game Fair, the GWCT Game Fair. This is the second year that it's been going, and we have lots of discussions about various things, celebrating the Welsh countryside, talking about farming, fishing, trees, that's become recreation, and lots of other issues. There are roving microphones within the space, within the room, for when people start to come in, then they can have their say. There are the house rules, and the house rules are, what's going on? Some canoodling on the table?
I'm sorry, you didn't get anyone else one.
So the house rules are that we've got roving mics for people to have their say, to make their comments robustly, respectfully, and then we can move on. I will moderate you if we get too carried away, so that can happen at any time. So, without any further ado, what I'm going to do is you all got a microphone, and if you hold on to that, it should all be on.
Thank you.
If you could just start from that end, give me please 30 seconds around 30 seconds on who you are, where you're from, rather than on the topic, just more about you.
I represent tenant farmers in Wales,
And your name, obviously.
all of Wales, and about a third of Wales is farmed by somebody other than the owner, and it's about 25% of farmers are tenants, so it's an important sector. And I also farm a tenanted farm on the Welsh borders, upland, beef, sheep, and a bit of arable.
My name is Gwynedd Orthgyn. I work for the Farmers Union of Wales here in Carmarthenshire, trying to help out farmers with their problems and issues that they have on the land. I'm not a farmer myself, though I went to the Welsh Agricultural College in Aberystwyth back in the 80s, a long time ago. So I've been working with the Farmers Union of Wales for over 30 years now. Background, my mother's a farmer's daughter, my father's a minister, so we're used to dealing with people. But some can be challenging, but I must admit, as I've been with them for over 30 years, I'm quite enjoying the job at the end of the day.
Prandar, good afternoon, I'm Rachel Mailey Davis and I am Head of Sustainability and Future Policy for Hubby Keep Cymru, so Meat Promotion Wales. It's got a very long job title, it covers quite a broad remit, but you probably heard that key word, it's everyone's favourite word at the moment, sustainability. Never has my sort of area of work been so trendy it is at the moment. Also farm with my husband Geraint in Bala, so we are sort of hill, beef and sheep as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay then, I'm going to start with this magazine. This magazine is from 1970, and there was a lot of discussion coming out of the Second World War about food production. Move on about 70 years and we have a new document, Sustainable Farming Scheme. So there's a lot of stuff which has happened in that period of time. We're going to have other discussions around farming, but this was really about food production. Can Wales produce enough food to feed its own population, or is that the wrong question? Is that a tough question?
Well, I would say that we can, and we need to. We need to keep productive land in production, and that's where the line will stay with us as the Farmers Union of Wales, instead of maybe going otherwise towards the horrendous word of planting trees.
Well, we're going to be discussing kind of planting trees a bit later on. So what you're saying is that keep the best productive land and farm it efficiently?
Well, there's no doubt that farmers are farming to the best of their capabilities. There's no doubt that some farmers are more efficient than others, but that's true in every walk of life, in whatever industry you are. You have farmers that are treating it as a way of life, but you have got those business people there as well. We all know that 80% of farmers rely on their subsidies, I'll say it like that, to ensure that they can make a livelihood from farming as it were. So that is a concern, that it is so dependent, especially with what you were referring to now with the new Sustainable Farming Scheme document that's out there. It is frustrating and that government can't accept that farmers need time to change, even though we've succeeded in persuading them to go to introduce a transition period to change from one scheme to the next. We still need to know the figures in order to be able to plan ahead. And you've got farmers having to plan, and maybe even, I was talking to somebody this morning, banks are refusing to give loans already because figures aren't available for future support. So what do you do about that then? And people just can't, farmers can't run a business without the knowledge that we need.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything, going back, well, we could obviously kind of run with that one. Should all farmers be trying to produce food under the new system if it's not going to be so handsomely rewarded? And I'm looking at you, Rich, for that one.
I think it's quite subjective. It depends on that individual farm. And I think we need to stop this sort of broad sweep brush approach to farming. And actually, it's about, and even on field level, you know, each field's different, let alone each farm's different. So I think you've got to take some honest decisions what's best for your farm. But I think, you know, where we sit, where I sit, you know, personally as well, is that sort of producing food and managing the natural landscape, protecting habitats, go hand in hand. And we've been doing it for decades. Whether we've always been doing it as much as we should do or to the right level, but absolutely we need, especially ruminant livestock, it's fundamental in terms of how we farm Wales, how we get the most that we possibly can from our landscape here in Wales. So I think it's absolutely got to be a feature. It's interesting you mentioned about food. I mean, when I'm going to be I have lots of conversations with people that quite often are perhaps in a Southern Wales bubble, and they think that we can all, you know, I've had people that think that, you know, on our sort of hill farm that's mainly rock and bracken, that, you know, we could grow all sorts, you know, that they don't quite understand it. So we're never going to be self-sufficient, you know, we'd have scurvy, wouldn't we, if we drove down that. But I think, you know, we have, you know, today, this classic maritime climate that hence why I've got a bit of frizz on my way in because of the rain. We grow grass really well. Ruminants can convert grass really well. You know, why are we trying to cheat the system? So I think for those areas that can grow grass really well, let's utilise it. Ruminants can utilise it because we haven't got a rumen, and you know that's how we produce top quality world-class food.
Sure. And are we eating that food? Dennis, do you?
Yeah, can I just go back to your
yes.
magazine here?
So,
Farmers were paid to produce food at pre-common market time, and now there are a lot of people that say because I think 75% of Wales is a less favoured area, uplands, hill, and there are a lot of people that say the food that's produced in these areas is such a small amount, not worth farming. I've got some statistics here. Can I read these out?
yes.
I'm old enough to remember rationing, food rationing.
Anyone else in the room on that? Put your hand up if you can remember food rationing. Good. Yes, food rationing. There's a gentleman who's been indicated over there. Thank you. Great, thank you. Yes, those are the ready mics, so I can bring you in. Go on, give me some stats, please, Dennis.
Food rationing in 1940, per person per week, 1 egg, 6 ounces of meat, 4 ounces of fats, that's butter or margarine, 4 ounces of cheese, 4 ounces of bacon, 8 ounces of sugar, 2 ounces of tea, 2 ounces of sweets. Vegetables, fruit, bread, milk wasn't rationed. That's 1 egg a week.
Austerity.
1 egg a week.
Okay, right.
Now,
So we're not
can
eating
I
that,
just
go on.
finish this little argument off? The stocking rate on Snowdon, I'm told, is 1 sheep to 2.5 acres. If you put that into livestock units a hectare, and a livestock unit is 1 cow or 6 sheep, it's 0.17 livestock units per hectare. And people will say, oh, why are you going to bother with it? Okay? I was 6 years in Australia on a sheep station near Broken Hill and a cattle station in the north of Western Australia. And the stocking rate is roughly the same, 0.01 livestock units per hectare, which means Snowdon is 16 times a higher stocking rate than Leith area in Australia. We can grow food in any part of the United Kingdom, all of it. And what the devil is the government doing, saying that we shouldn't be growing food or very little on Snowdon or the Gower. It's sleepwalking to disaster. We are running and are going to run out of food. Australia will be importing food by 2050, you see. They won't be able to grow any.
Okay.
That's my argument.
Yeah, no, thank you. Right. Any view? Yes,
Sorry, but with regard to the statistics there, rationing fair play there, then a little bit later, people, they were calculating with it that people were spending 45% of their income on food. Now, is it as low as 15%, I think it is? If it was down to 8% for now.
It all depends on your income. If your income's low, it's still about 17%, but the average income is around 8-9%.
But that's all down to politics, isn't it? Because governments don't want inflation, and the price of food is a big factor in any inflation figures.
Well, the whole Arab Spring was based on the price of bread going up. So that's where governments are very, very keen on the price of food be kept as low as possible. Which so we're having, there was someone on, I think it was on Newsnight the other week saying the food prices being reduced is good news for the consumers, bad news for farmers. It's almost impossible to happen. Any views on that? Any views on food prices in the room? No, we can keep moving. Oh, there's a hand up over there. Yes, please, sir. Sorry, go on. Yeah, no, I will moderate. No, go, okay.
Okay.
Hang on, please. Wait, you had something to say.
Yeah, food inflation. Up until 2000, the year 2000, when we had the McSharry reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, farmers would pay per head the amount of food that they produced. Since when, that was converted into acres, so you didn't have to produce the food, you'd still get paid. And now you're going to get nothing for producing food.
That was a headage payment you're talking
That
about.
used to be the headage payment.
Right, so that's not for producing food, that's just
Yeah.
for having livestock.
Yeah, but if we received, say, £500 for one bullock, we'd get £500 subsidy on top of that, equals £1,000. Now we get £1,000 to £1,200 for the same bullock. So if you take out that subsidy, which is paid for by the English taxpayer to Brussels and came back here, if you take that out, actually price of food hasn't gone up at all. The taxpayer's paying a subsidy to the non-taxpayer. If you take that into account, it actually hasn't gone up. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot, yes, sir.
I just want to really add it to from the tough times of food rationing from the 40s onwards to today's day and age where we waste. On a statistic I read the other day, 38% of the food that we buy has ended up going to the bin, which is colossal, isn't it? We've become such a society of waste that we really need to wake up and value what we actually put in the shopping basket as we're putting it in there.
Yeah, and I can ask some tough questions now, but I mean, should, on that note, maybe meat is too cheap then? If we're throwing away valuable food because it's so cheap and undervalued, should we not be trying to change the way that we farm, or should we see what the market wants? This is where we're into. Were you shaking your head? I don't know. Yeah, good. This is exactly what this is what it's about. And then do jump back.
I don't think it's anything to do with what we grow here. It's the variety of food that's imported. Everything's got sell-by dates on. And I know they're saying you don't have to eat it by sell-by dates, but the majority of people will throw stuff out, even when it's fresh, because they've had it in 1 or 2 days. I've got a friend who won't eat any leftovers whatsoever. Everything goes in the bin. And I almost cry every time I go to their house, because I see the amount of good food going to waste, where we don't waste anything. Everything's recycled, and if we can't eat it, the dogs eat it, or somebody else eats it. But it's people's ignorance, I hate to say that they need to be more, they need to value their food more of what they've got. But I don't blame the farmers at all. It's got nothing to do with farmers. It's the people who actually make the food.
I once heard someone say about it that, and this is a generalisation, I totally appreciate that, but actually probably too few of us have ever really known hunger, and that's perhaps sometimes the problem, that we don't value food. It's not about pounds, it's about the value of having food. And I think it's that distance, fortunately, in modern society, that, sort of fewer of us experience real hunger.
Yeah. We produce a lot of lamb. Yes, sir.
I was going to say there's the whole ultra processed food concept as sort of something first. It's very good for farming, I think, because there's somebody who's very cleverly marketed a kind of concept to just summarise everything's wrong about buying food that is not fresh and not from the farm. And it's kind of full of preservatives and emulsifiers and things. But it's probably, you know, hard to get those people who might not want to eat ultra processed food to go and buy a leg of lamb for 65 quid from the butcher, which is what their parents probably used to do. But that's a huge leap. And it's the salmon and it's the chicken. You know, talk about an industry that's kind of evolved through technology and no subsidy. They seem to be kind of, you know, on a farm, most farms have to do both. They have a vast amount of chicken sheds and they're doing it, and well done them. But I'm interested to throw the chickens into this debate at some point. Well, I'm sure you were going to anyway.
I was going to move. Yes, you have your.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
many years ago, I was off-siding to a geologist, and he had to get home to avoid a divorce from his wife for the long weekend. And there was a cyclone came. The cyclone, that's like a hurricane in Australia. And of course, after 2 hours, we got completely bogged down, stuck. We were there for 2 days. We had one tin of Hungarian goulash and 4 bottles of Hamilton Springton claret and a pocket chestnut. I was very ill.
Too much rich food from someone used to 1 egg a week. Yes, I'm sure. Austerity. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is, at school, children are not taught how to cook anymore. That's number one. Number two, no houses built these days have a larder. They have a bicycle shed or something ridiculous. What happens when people go and buy food? They buy too much, don't eat it all, won't fit in the fridge, in the bin. Every house should have to have a larder, and every child, doesn't matter what sex, should be taught how to cook and budgeting. They're not. That's where it starts.
But no politician is ready to tell people what to do. That's the flip side. I just want to come back to red meat, particularly red meat, because Wales produce magnificent Welsh lamb, but most of which is, do correct me, is exported, and it's a strong export market because others are prepared to pay more for it. We like to pay less for our meat, eat the New Zealand stuff, which is highly efficient, etc. Does farming hang on to what it wants to do rather than what it needs to do, which is maybe change some of its meat production?
If there's a market,
And that could be poultry, you see. That could be getting out of lamb and going into poultry, because that's what the market's paying for.
if the market's there, it's alright for us to produce it. I think the figures are, is it, correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, is it 30% go to Europe, 5% go to the rest of the world, we eat 5% ourselves, and the rest goes to the Mediterranean in the southeast of England, which is a big market, so that's not very far away at the end, isn't it? So, you're not going to expect people from Wales to be eating all the land that's produced in Wales at the end of the day. But, sorry. No, yeah. So, what was I going to say now? But we're producing it to a high standard and very environmentally friendly as well. Dennis referred to Snowdon earlier on. Snowdon would look like it does today without animals, livestock grazing on it. We know Pedro Jones grazes cattle on the side of Snowdon, which is supposed to be very good for the environment.
And that's what we're going to talk about at the end of the afternoon at 4 o'clock.
That was a plug.
No, that was not intentional. But so the point is that livestock have lots of important uses. I'm just trying to focus on the food production, and if we are maybe stuck in tradition rather than what the market wants, because we want to keep farmers on the land.
I think there's also, we thought, you know, this is as farmers, and it's a bit of a compromise, but actually we always need to remember that not all meat is created equal, and actually we have got one of the most sustainable places on earth to produce red meat because of the climate. So actually there's nothing shameful, therefore, for our premium products is to chase those export markets, because actually it's much more sustainable globally for us to produce lamb here than say it is in the United Arab Emirates, for example. So we've got to be a bit more grown up, because it's quite complex.
It is, but should we be using the same techniques, let's say the ranching techniques, rather than the old traditional Welsh, smaller I won't say hardier breeds because we're going to be talking about those. We're using continental breeds in this landscape, and it's having a higher environmental impact than perhaps New Zealand for this breed. So.
But you've got to remember here in Wales, and it is different to what it is in England, but you've got the language and the culture being supported, and it's a very important point, especially from the Families Union of Wales point of view, to protect the family farm. And I was referred to earlier on that there's a way of life aspect to it, but there are also business as well. You do not want to see ranch farming in Wales. There are areas where it is done because that's the most practical way to do it, and it's acceptable. But I would say from the membership that I know within the union in County Carmarthenshire, I can't think immediately of more than maybe 10 farmers that have no interest whatsoever in the environment there. It's all done. Farmers don't go out thinking in the morning, I need to protect swifts or whatever they are, you know what I mean? But they do it, and they do it as a way of life.
But they also don't get up in the morning and think, I'm going to go and wreck the environment.
Exactly.
I think that's quite important.
Can referring back to the exports and referring to Arabs, I had the opportunity to go to Qatar for the World Cup back in November, and went to visit the Balatna dairy farm, which is very interesting. We managed, there was nobody there to talk to, but me and Mike, we just wandered about, and we came across the deputy farm manager, and he said, oh, come in, we had a long conversation with him there. But what frightened us most was, well, we knew there were 14,000 dairy cattle being milked in 300 unit Herringwood Palace, which was phenomenal in itself. Now, where did you get all the food from for these animals? We imported from the Ukraine, Spain and America. That's the silage, the maize and the alfalfa. That's all done 8 months in advance. Now, you just imagine that carbon footprint, and obviously there are money means absolutely nothing to them, and it was just phenomenal. As you say, Rachel said, no, we produce food, environmentally friendly food there. The carbon footprint would be much less on what we produce than what was happening in Balatna. And nothing against Balatna, that's the way they do it. I'm not criticising them, but when you talk about carbon footprint, there's a big mark there.
Okay. Yes, sir.
John Folks, beef and sheep farmer. We mentioned, just to mention, President Putin showed up, giving us a terrific lesson. Within days of invading Ukraine, the price of oilseed grain for cooking, started picking up, and it went threefold in a matter of weeks. It is important for British farmers and non-farmers to keep the larder full first and farm as sustainable as possible, but start with a full larder and work towards maximum sustainability.
Okay, thanks.
Imported food is only cheap when you don't have to buy it. When you depend on it, it will be a lot more expensive and probably not as sustainable as what we produce here, because other countries have various ways of keeping it, which are not could not be stood under the same scrutiny as our own.
Go on.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more.
She certainly agreed.
In writing. Is it, no, and I think the key thing is, and we think we're very good in here in Wales doing this as well, is making our farms more circular. Is actually we sort of perhaps we limit the purchase inputs. We limit to what we're buying and what we're needed from outside, and actually utilise nutrients on farm, utilise the feed. You know, with people in Wales, we're pioneering in terms of grassy varieties, how we graze in terms of grazing management. You know, we've got a world-renowned operation in Iberzo in terms of seed genetics. We're striving ahead. I think it all feeds into making ourselves more sustainable and circular, so we haven't got that sort of reliance on sort of global partners. You're absolutely right.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got a few hands going up. Do you want to add something on that particular point, or should we just go straight to any more questions? Please do come in with the roving mics for you to say whatever you want. Do you have something to say on exactly that point?
No, I was just going to say, sheep in Wales are a recent phenomenon, really. Up until about 100 years ago, it was mainly cattle,
Right, cattle, we can start talking about, well, we will be
and
talking
then
about
goats, and then
Cattle and
sheep
goats.
recently. And Wales exports 90% of the land it produces. By 2050, if the Welsh Government's tree planting programme succeeds, which it won't, land production in Wales will be reduced by 25%.
Okay.
A
well,
disaster.
Yeah, well, we will be talking about tree planting, or not tree planting, but trees within the landscape this afternoon within the same context. Yes, sir.
But no one can disagree with food security and producing wonderful food. But what we're
Can you
missing.
just define food security?
Well, sorry, we don't want to import more food than we need to import.
Is that food self-sufficiency?
Yes, probably.
So food security is about nutritional access. Sorry.
But I'm saying we're missing the sort of point is how we fund all of this. That's the key point that we're skirting around. Like, it's subsidised to this day. The taxpayer has got a lot of demands on his or her, tax pound, and it's like, how do we justify continuing to put the CAP's with 40% of its budget into the agricultural machine, and it's worked reasonably well to this, but we've reached a crossroads, and that's what the politicians are wrestling with. Is how do you kind of maintain the brilliance that you already do, and justify that to the rest of the the demand on their money.
Sure. The auditor is knocking at the door and saying, where's this public money going? Is there value for money to the public purse?
I think that's where we need to be a bit more clever in terms of
We
farming.
as in what the farmers.
Farmers, sorry. Yeah, I'll always say we as myself, because I always think of myself as a farmer primarily. But I think the key is we produce food, but we also we need to stop perhaps thinking that all the other things are sort of less valuable perhaps than the food we produce. But also, the fact that in terms of water management, in terms of water quality, holding back water, in terms of habitat creation, in terms of how we manage the world's soils and clean air. We need to be a bit more bold, I think. We need better data, and that's the key, data to reinforce it. But actually, all the other services that we deliver as farmers need to be part of that argument, because actually, you're right, just the food almost isn't strong enough, especially when people perhaps can't afford to buy those products. We've got to almost say about all these other things. Don't even start me on tourism, because Wales wouldn't look the way it does without farmers. And it's tourism actually is worth more to our economy than agriculture. So, we do need to. Yeah.
And we'll be talking about recreation in about an hour's time.
Sorry. I won't talk about
But
that.
basically, all of these things, all of these topics are connected. Farming, forestry, the rivers, the food production, and it is quite hard to have a kind of silo conversation when they actually all bleed into lots of other ones. But yeah, show better value, what farming provides, etc. That's okay. So,
Thank you. You've all identified a number of challenges that farming is facing, and I think you're saying that those challenges are increasing for a variety of reasons. Can I ask, to what extent do you think the problem is to do with the supermarkets increasingly focusing on price rather than availability and other factors? And if you think that is part of the problem, and I'll expect to see what I think, I'm just interested to know what your respective organisations are doing about it.
Sorry, I thought I'm talking a lot, but obviously we do a lot with the retailers, and in a previous life I have worked for retail and actually worked with a lot of retailers, and I'm very protective of the retailers. I'm probably as a farmer too, and I've also worked a lot in the independent sector, and I think there's a role for all types of retailers, whether that's direct selling from farmers, whether it's independents, butchers, retailers. We've got to have them all, because we've got a lot of, especially in terms of land, we've got a lot of product to shift. We need their backing, and actually the retailers now, you're right, price will always be their fault. That's their sort of their first initial perhaps element, because it's attractive to shareholders. But more increasingly, they are seeing the bigger picture, and they're understanding actually that they need security of supply, which means they've got to look after their suppliers as well. So we're seeing increasing initiatives where it's about partnerships between retailers and producers. It doesn't affect every producer, that's the problem, because the way it's so fragmented, both in terms of dairy, but also more significantly in red meat. But I think there's a role that we have good dialogue with all the retailers. We've got to keep pushing it, and especially it's one with the unions as well, to keep having those dialogues. But I think that it's a time when we can't be thinking that people that are partners are enemies, would be my key thing.
We're very concerned But as it just said, you've got to keep the retailers on board, but we don't want the retailers taking advantage of the farmers and the producers. There's a groceries code of conduct, and it hasn't got any teeth. At the end of the day, it's just a mishmash of whatever they want to say, and most probably the retailers have had more influence on the contents of that document than anybody else in it, which is very disappointing. But as long as they can make sure that their shelves are stocked, and to be honest with you, I don't think they'd be too concerned if it has to come from outside the country. They'll get it from outside the country, they'll source it from somewhere in there. I was very disappointed, and this is a true story, unbelievable, about the attitude of a politician. We went over to Brussels when they were starting to introduce double tax for sheep before it became electronic now, wasn't it? But we were lobbying back in Europe, and we had two Welsh Labour MEPs sitting in front of us. One had no interest whatsoever in the conversation, the other at least had their elbows on the table listening to us. And when we said, listen, Dennis was talking about reducing sheep numbers by 25%, well, we said, I want this could have a big influence on the numbers of sheep and lamb production in Wales. Oh, we don't want it, what about food security, we said now. Oh, in 2005 she said, we've got no problem with food security, we can import food from anywhere in the world, because we can. But in saying that, that politician was saying, I don't care about those people living in the countries that we're exporting. They can do without their food as long as we can buy it in. It was me, us, wasn't it? And I thought it was a horrible attitude, which needs to change. Politicians tend to listen to the last 5 people they've heard talking to them, unfortunately, and they speak for a vote instead of speaking what needs to be done. And not we will start talking about badges now, but that is a prime example where we know that the politicians change their minds overnight about the culling plans for badges in Wales. But I don't suppose we're supposed to talk about that.
No, well,
I don't mind. I don't mind. I haven't got a problem with it.
there's lots of that, and we will talk about it in other sessions, but I'm going to keep us focused on food production in the last kind of 5-10 minutes, because it's coming into lunchtime, and we have to stay on food production, because that is the raison d'etre for this terrible word. That is the focus for a lot of farmers, but perhaps they could widen what they produce. What about producing vegetables sorry, did you want to come back on your earlier point? No, you didn't. Okay, fine. Availability. Well, actually, that brings us on to availability. The fact is that there weren't enough vegetables available, so they started to import them from other places where they didn't normally. Perhaps Welsh farmers could start to produce vegetables. I'm not saying in the uplands, but in lots of different ways in order to diversify their food production and thus be ready to feed the retailer rather than the retailers going elsewhere.
And I've often thought horticulture is an opportunity in Wales, obviously in quite small pockets. You know, for example, we're 85% triple SI, mainly rock, and quite high up, so it wouldn't be for us. But I suppose there's quite a naive, a naive approach to this at the moment. This assumption that a lot of people can convert when they can't. But also, there's massive, and I used to manage be part of an estate shop. We had about 22 acres of growing about 10 years ago, but it's incredibly risky. And that's the problem. It's risky, it's expensive, you need the proper kit. It's not quite straightforward thinking, do you know what, I'm going to reduce my flock and I'm going to grow pumpkins in this field this year. It needs so much more time and expertise, we don't quite have it.
Absolutely, but then maintaining the status quo of business as usual could be just as disastrous.
I agree.
You know, poultry farmers, a lot of farmers within mid Wales probably 10, 15, 20 years ago didn't think about having a poultry unit on their land, and now they do, because there's obviously ramifications coming out of that, but that was supplying the market. Hydroponics for vegetables, you could be outside Dolgellala, where I used to live, and you could be doing sheep on the hill, and your hydroponics in a container box next to the farmhouse.
And I think I'm a fan that you can mix things up a bit, and I'd probably include trees. I know we're going to talk about it later, but I'd probably include trees in that as well. That you can mix it up. It hasn't got to be an either-or situation. And the same with that. But there's probably a point I want to make about red meat, because obviously I'm paid to talk about red meat, but actually I feel that sometimes we've completely lost our way with nutrition. And I'm a big fan about resetting the dialogue when we talk about nutritional density of red meat. For example, lamb contains 8 amino acids, zinc, iron. It has omega-3, omega-6 balance right. We've lost our way a little bit, I think, sometimes. We don't talk, so we don't propagate people should eat more meat. Actually, you should consume less, but buy better. And actually, you eat for nutrition. And I think we've lost our way.
Eat the whole beast, nose to tail, not just the finest cuts, nose to tail, the liver, the kidneys, the whole, not just the best cuts. And I hear that sometimes. Eat better meat. Well, what does better meat mean? You can have a really good beef burger, which people call fast food, but it's made nose to tail of a grass-grown sheep or sheep beef burger, genetically edited, of course. But what I'm trying to say is that there is potential.
But there's a culture, isn't it? You need a big culture change, don't you, as well?
Yes.
I was impressed in a recent interview that we held with 3 different candidates for post within the union there. 2 youngsters on that being interviewed that day referred to more environmentally friendly farming. But when you're talking to my generation of farmers, they'd rather stick to keeping livestock and producing food there. Going back to changing, some farmers don't mind changing. Hydroponics, we've got to remember, my mum was developing a hydroponic scheme into polytunnels. And it's coming along well. The second polytunnel is as a result of the success of the first polytunnel. And he's selling to local hotels in the Carnarvon area. So that's an interesting project.
And usually talking to other farmers about that as well.
Well, he wants to develop his own project first, doesn't he? me, myself and I. But at the end of the day, when you think of growing horticulture projects on your land, there's a problem with the labour force as well, isn't there? And the lack of the labour force, that's, we've been grateful for those people coming from Eastern Europe to do that harvesting for us and what have you like. So that's another issue, but it's all seasonal work, isn't it?
Yeah. Labour's a big issue we could start to talk about. Yes, sorry, James.
Yeah, I just point out that in Pembrokeshire, most farms grew potatoes up until about 20 years ago. They're now all dairy farms. And a friend of mine in Northumberland, not Wales, 20, 30 years ago, had a contract on cauliflowers and had, I think, 20 acres of cauliflowers with one of the supermarkets, but they were the wrong shape. They all went in the mucky, the whole lot. It's terribly risky vegetables. Keeping a few sheep isn't risky.
I think it goes back to the lady's point earlier, doesn't it? We've lost our way. I mean, a bit like, the fact we have to market wonky carrots and they're cheaper. I mean, I don't care what a carrot looks like. I mean, it could taste
But
good.
most people do, you see.
And that's a sad bit.
At the end of the day, the supermarkets try the wonky veg. They try the wonky veg, it lasts for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then they realise it's a lost leader and they get back to perfection. I don't like the word educate, it's about informing. The story could come from farmers. I would argue it could come from supermarkets, but they would say nothing to do with us. We've just got to keep the citizens happy because the politicians don't want Arab Spring, which is when people started to riot because of the price of food. So there's all these moving parts. Yes, please.
We've all got to be responsible for ourselves as well. If everybody grows a few things in pots, or if they've got a garden, they can have a polytunnel and different things. It will all help. We're all reliant, the government should do this, the government should do that. We should do something for ourselves and
Sure.
get on with it. Back to your situation about the war, everybody had a pig if they could, everybody grew things in the garden. Why can't we do that now? And why don't we preserve our food instead of chicken out? Why don't we bottle stuff like we used to? Why don't we have brawn? Why don't we do the old-fashioned way?
Because we're a highly urbanised nation now.
And also we've got rules and regulations that need things up to bureaucracy has gone mad with producing food, isn't it? It's just ridiculous, isn't it? Why haven't we got many abattoirs by now in the area?
Yes.
We've got to go and kill pigs in Denby, they go take pigs from Abertaron or whatever you are in this country. So there's a lot of problems with the supply chain in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add in, I was talking to somebody that understands soils so much better than myself. We were talking about hydroponics and so on. You start growing it out of the soil, you're losing 50% of the nutritional value that comes from the soil. Soil is so important to food, and then if we forget what we are growing in the ground to feed us at the end of the day, we are going to be walking disasters going forward, losing that nutritional value for our own health. So we've got to be really careful how we go forward with the type of food that we want to consume going into the future.
Yeah, that's true. You know, so soil contains every single mineral we need for human health, which blows my mind still. But actually, you can see that ruminants, they get all that goodness via the grass, and actually that's when we get it. That's how we get it. So,
which is why farmers and all of us maybe need to look after our soils. And possibly that's where the Welsh
another session.
No, well, I didn't know, but that's where the Welsh government is trying to say that we will pay for the soil to be looked after, and then you will reap the harvests of food productivity, and we will get better nutrition, which is not the same as bad calories. And in a way, we've been eating bad calories, not good nutrition.
But it takes time to change.
And we want to keep the culture in the farmhouses.
Exactly, because I am concerned that Dennis was talking about dairy potato farmers in Pembrokeshire become dairy farmers, isn't it? Well, 15 years ago, nobody wanted to be a dairy farmer because the price of milk was so low. Now, you've got big units, exactly as in massive units being set up, and they used to start with 50, 60 cows. They start with 400 now. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But at the end of the day, and the financial outlay of those farms is phenomenal, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes planning, it takes building, it takes getting the infrastructure all right for it there. Because at the end of that, then you've got to make sure that you've got a contract to sell the milk, and then you've got something that's been passed now that hasn't got any teeth at all, that the processors and the farmers are going to be totally dependent on what the supermarkets are going to be offering to pay. So it's a very insecure industry, because at the end of the day, you could have a failed crop of whatever you're going to grow, even if it's just barley or potatoes or cabbages or lettuces. In a bad season, you can lose the whole lot, and that's your income gone for the full year.
Yeah. Right. We've come to the.
I don't need to be depressing. It's being realistic, isn't it? It's realistic, isn't it? At the end of the day, people need to be understand.
Yeah.
Farmers don't want subsidy. They'd rather live without subsidy, but they've been given that subsidy in order to ensure that food prices have been kept low, and to ensure a sufficient supply of food to feed the nation, isn't it? Europe as it was then.
Yeah. But it is changing. How we eat, how we is changing. So I know I can see a hand up there. There was this was produced, I know it wasn't done in Wales, but it was UK wide. It was the Food Strategy Plan. Now that applies to the UK. I think it was Henry Dimbleby, whatever, and it was acknowledging what farming had done. The Green Revolution is a very good example. All of Asia was supported by new technology because fertilizers worked with wheat, and then that saved millions of people. And the idea is that we have to change our consumption, but no government is brave enough to actually tell people what to do, to eat more nutritious food, to eat less of it but higher quality, pay the farmer more for it. We've got in a bit of a spiral. So it's really trying to find a way out of that spiral in the next 2 minutes.
But if you wanted to let the market influence what farmers produce,
which is what it's doing.
And it should be doing it. At the end of the day, people don't want to take on to cook their food these days, either, do they? Going back to what to the curriculum, national curriculum, isn't it? At the end of the day, if you're not taught to maybe enjoy the process of producing a meal, it's 5 minute job in a microwave these days, and the youngsters are happy, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't start realising the quality of food until they get their own children maybe, and then start thinking, oh heck, I better feed my children a bit better than what I ate myself in the last 15 years, type of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But maybe the sheep being produced by farmers is now going to be more perfect towards little school dinners, kind of pre-prepared. So what I'm saying is the market is changing. They want instant food, or the ability to cook it very fast. So this is about kind of risk again, isn't it? How to change your livestock from something you've used or you've been kind of farming for generations to then farm something completely different, but still livestock, but it's going to be more suitable for what the market wants.
I never knew what pulled pork was about 5 years ago, and everybody likes that pulled pork and barbecue sauce or whatever it is now, don't they?
But maybe farmers need to somehow try and get ahead of that, and it's luscious lamb, whatever. It's pulled pork. There's.
I also think there's a bit of a role as well. It's actually for farmers to eat lamb as well. you know, if I had a pang for any farmer I come across and say, oh, I hate lamb, it's awful, or when they go to a pub, they don't ask where the meat's from. And I think it goes back to this point before, we've all got a role to play, and I think it's just the same with meat. Ask where your food comes from. You know, we're doing our bits, but actually we've all got a bit of a role here.
Sure.
Thank you. We've got to go for a panel if I'm carrying you here.
You're enjoying it so much you stayed.
Oh yeah, that'll be the back. Now, at the end of the day, what I'd like to ask is, all those discussions taking place here,
Hold the microphone onto your mouth.
how do we get to people who's going to pass this message on? It's all very well talking amongst themselves, but we need to actually push this to the government.
Education.
And education, yes. One lad's a shipper. He was accosted by a woman a few months ago. And overnight time we shoot between 50 and 80 rabbits every ballot. And she said, why don't you get your meat from Tesco's like everybody else? And the animal's hurt. That was actually said. And with like some rabbit, I mean, that was mostly got Romans 2,000 years ago. People have been eating that right up until a few years ago, a few decades ago. Now, a lot of it just goes to the waste, they're a pest.
And that's because the food system is highly regulated.
No, it goes back to education.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But who does the Who does the informing, the educating? Does the government do it?
Government. It's policies, national curriculum, isn't it?
It hasn't got it. Well,
We need to be a bit more French sometimes, I think, don't we?
Well, no, we
It's
are.
cheap,
We need
isn't
to
it?
be more French. We need to be more
I
European.
mean, don't quote me on that, but I think you do.
But it's cheaper not to have cooking on the national curriculum, isn't it? Because there's cost implication, there's health and safety implications. Because you never know what the hot oven will feel like for a child that's 10 years old, probably, or what have you like in it. So there are many implications with regard to having it on the curriculum, but it's a necessity from where we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a bit shortbread and fruit kebabs, I think, isn't it, still? But I know our organisations, you know, we do what we can in terms of education, but I suppose, you know, resources that, you know, our pockets are only a certain depth, shall we say, I think.
Well, exactly what it is. You have done a lot of work on fast food projects, haven't they? Using red meat for fast food.
I'm going to have to go from the team. But,
So, no, no.
this is not necessarily the government. This is pressure being put on the government, on the supermarkets. This is where the legislation comes from. And it's up to the farming community, whether the air, food, air, or whatever. That's it.
Or maybe individual farmer collectives should farm. I'm going to talk to Gareth Wynne Jones tomorrow about farmer collectives, cooperatives. France does cooperative farmers much better than we do in the UK.
Yeah, but we're talking
Go
locally.
on,
This is just a local thing with cooperatives, and you have to look at the national idea for this. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Well, you want
Enjoy your panic.
That's where I am.
Yes, on that. I think we're about to wrap it up. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Observations
The
from the panelists?
gentleman talking about subsidies. I just wanted to point out,
Probably close your mouth.
with 30% of Wales farmed by somebody else in Yola, can you hear?
Put it closer.
I'll be
Put
eating,
it
I'll be eating it.
Put it on your chin. Put it on your chin.
Yeah, subsidies, 30% of Wales farmed by somebody other than the owner. The proposed sustainable farming scheme and the habitat scheme, which is going to be next year, and I've waded through all of that. Both of those are not accessible to tenant farmers because tenants can only use the land for agricultural purposes as defined by the 1947 Act without permission from the landlord. So, the worst case scenario, 30% of Wales will not have any subsidies, which could be the death knell of all those farmers. Very serious. Welsh Government are aware of it. It's a very difficult problem to solve.
Okay, that's something that I think is across the UK, the role of tenant farmers as the subsidy disappears and the farming support payments are coming in. It is a big problem, and the Rock report in England had the same kind of answers. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just following on to what Dennis just picked up on there, you run a time equation 10 years from now with the new proposed 20% habitat and new creation woodlands on farms now. Small family farms are definitely not going to be sustainable. So we're going to have a shift, they're going to sell up. and on a global scale, agriculture companies are buying land up everywhere, and companies are getting bigger. So you're going to lose the communities, you're going to lose the small family farms, and is that what we want? Imported food, we're regulated so heavily by the RSPCA, Lion, just a bit more on the poultry side. There's nowhere to go. There's only sell up and get out. Because the bureaucracy in this country to do with agriculture is absolutely insane.
Thank you very much, Jonathan Barbara. Right, someone's phone really quite insistent. Maybe that is the end of this episode, this session. Anyone else want to throw something else? Because the next session starts at 1:30, talking about recreation and how to balance the right of access. Well, we will come back to this.
Can we have a wrap up so I can...
No, absolutely. I was going to do the wrap up. I was going to ask for your kind of wrap up views, but we'll be talking about kind of recreation, rights of access, impact on the environment. Any other comments? Because this is about Wales and rural farming communities staying in the farmhouse, the Welsh language staying strong, the culture staying strong, but having to adapt. And that's what I think makes this a difficult conversation to have, but one that needs to be had. Sorry, this gentleman, yes sir.
It's becoming uneconomical to farm in Wales. And the costs are going up, the more rules and regulations. I spoke to a lot of farmers in my generation, and they're just hanging on. And the young generation, my son's generation, they're leaving the farming community. And they're not going to come back. Because they can find a job, driving a machine, £28 an hour. Weekends free, 5 days a week. Why is they not going to come back to farming unless there is a living to be made? And I can tell you one thing, in the next couple of years there's going to be a massive exodus from hill farming. Unless you get this right, you are going to make a damn good job of ruining a tradition that's lasted for centuries. So on your own head be it.
I mean, you're talking about the Welsh government, yes.
Well, Welsh government, farming in general,
Yeah.
costs have shot up, and the farm gate prices we get have stayed the same. Inflation is taken off. Inflation hasn't touched the farm gate price. We get the same price as we did 20, 30 years ago when I started farming. And I farmed with conservation all my life, and I planted 20,000 trees. I planted 2 miles of hedging. Now the government's saying to me, well, maybe not. There's some funding. It's been 7 years. 7 years since Brexit. And it's about time you pulled your finger out and showed us some goddamn leadership and get us out of this mess before it's too late.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just make one comment? I've got hold of a report written in 1953 for the Ministry of Agriculture on farming in mid Wales, with all the problems and how to solve them, identical to now. We're still here.
Yeah, we're still here. Yeah. Well, actually, we are still here. It's kind of 1 o'clock, and always towards the end of the session, things get more interesting, more spicy. That was a very good interjection from that gentleman. He did seem to think that I had the control.
I'm not sure who thought you were speaking.
Very
First Minister, so I'm not sure about that.
I must admit that
But it was good.
there are youngsters leaving, there's no doubt about that, but I know there are youngsters staying as well there.
Yes.
We got members here in this tent now. We know that their next generation are coming through. You go down to Penllyn, you've got a lot of youngsters coming to farming, following their parents and what have you, and there are youngsters wanting to start farming as well there.
Yeah, that's it, but also not just farming, also maybe being land managers. I know that's not the same word.
I remember me referring to the interview panel, the 3 that were on the panel not so long ago. They were interested in change. They were interested in more environmentally farming. And it's going to come, but it's not going to happen overnight. And that's what people need to understand, what politicians need to understand. It might take a full generation, it might take 25 years, but it's got to take time.
It does, but it doesn't. We need to make sure it happens quicker than that gentleman is concerned that people are going to leave the farmhouse.
You were saying a lot of truth. There's no doubt about that there. But there are positives there as well.
Can I give some positives to wrap it? You
Good.
can tell about the last word, can't you? It's, Garrett and Sean.
Go for it.
On
Go on.
There's three things I want to make, and if you remember anything, I know we've babbled about loads of stuff today, but one of them, first of all, is not all meat is created equal. And I think that's really key, especially in the Welsh context. The second thing is that we can produce top quality, world-class food as well as maintaining and looking after the natural environment. And the third and final thing, whether you're a farmer or if you're not a farmer, farmers here in Wales are absolutely part of the solution in terms of climate crisis and the nature crisis. And I think we need to really grasp hold of that, and we don't forget that, because we've all got a role to play with that. So yeah, that would be mine.
And take the industry with you, not against you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a very strong point to end on. Thank you very much, first of all, to you, the audience, including the gentleman who's just been a guard, because this is the whole point about having these discussions without fear or favour, to be able to air it. And I think it's just as important for farmers, land, people on the land to come into these spaces and to have these conversations. And thank you for all of your interaction. Thank you very much to Dennis and to Gwyneth and to Rachel, Jochova. And we're going to have a little break for about 15 minutes, and we're going to reconvene at 1:30. So thank you again to all of you. Cheers.
Enjoyed it?